The federal government is expected to announce price rises for disability service providers worth nearly $1 billion over the next financial year. Service providers have long argued that prices within the scheme were too low and threatened the viability of their organisations.
The money will come from existing NDIS funding, which has been underspent over recent years. To discuss this and other political news of the week, we're talking with Paul Fletcher, who's the Minister for Families and Social Services. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Good morning, good to be with you.
So all this money is underspent money, is that correct?
Well, this is money that is allocated to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and it's administered by the National Disability Insurance Agency. They have a set of prices which apply when the participants in the scheme, now over 250,000 Australians, go out to get services like physiotherapy or occupational therapy, personal care, support and so on. Now, what the agency has just determined and what we'll be announcing is quite significant increases, around $850 million extra to be spent in 2019-20. And so, for example, there'll be increases in the rates paid for personal care of up to 15.4%, an extra $11 an hour almost for therapists. So essentially an increase in the rate card. This is important because it means, first of all, more being paid to the providers, but very importantly, it'll help develop the markets within which these services are provided, particularly, for example, in rural areas or other areas where we want to attract more providers, providing more services to the 250,000 Australians now supported under the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Minister, this pricing has been a huge bone of contention for many of the providers. It seems that you are delivering on that today. Is it delivering enough to keep those providers viable?
Well, we've worked very carefully in consulting with the providers, an extensive study last year with some external consulting help. We've got an independent pricing reference group which comprises not just executives of the National Disability Insurance Agency, but a couple of external independent experts. And so we do believe that this will deliver a significant difference. It will help address some of those viability concerns. But very importantly, our focus is on the participants in the scheme, making sure that there are enough service providers, be they the physiotherapists or the occupational therapists, be they the providers of personal care and other things, enough of those people and service providers in the market all around Australia, because we're rolling out the scheme further and further all around Australia.
Is this, if I may, is this an admission, this additional money, that the administration of the NDIS has been failing in the past? We saw the Prime Minister intervene earlier about this, and if that's the case, how are we going to be guaranteed that the administrators are going to use this money wisely? Well,
in fact, what it reflects is careful ongoing work by the National Disability Insurance Agency overseeing the scheme to constantly review price levels, to make adjustments where appropriate, and we're making lots of other adjustments. We've got new specialist pathways for people coming into the scheme, a psychosocial disability pathway, that's very serious mental illness, a complex support needs pathway. We've revamped the website that most people use to interact with the scheme. So in a whole range of ways, we're continually working to make improvements to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Of course, with a scheme as large as this, rolling out as quickly as it is, there will be issues arise from time to time. We need to get onto those and fix them. But, you know, mid-2016, there were 30,000 Australians supported, now over 250,000, and the estimate is that by the time of completion, 460,000 Australians. So
any changes to the administration of the NDIS?
We are seeking to continually improve the administration of the NDIS. There's a lot of listening going on. We've listened to providers and to participants, and that's really underpinned this decision to increase prices that are paid, which means we'll be spending close to, as you've said, $1 billion, but about $850 million more in 2019-20.
You have been in government for quite some time, for many years now. The NDIS has been significantly underfunded. Its rollout has been behind schedule.
Well, I'll take issue with it. It's not been underfunded. It's been fully funded to meet all of the needs of the participants in the scheme.
Well, some providers have been underpaid, some eligible people have not been able to access the scheme. Now that we're just under 2 months likely away from a federal election, is this just the government trying to clean up the mess before the election?
Not at all. It's part of the continuous job of rolling out the National Disability Insurance Scheme and that involves a whole range of elements. Agreements with the states. We've got full scheme agreements, as they're called, with New South Wales, with South Australia, with Tasmania. We're working to land those with the remaining states. We're continually increasing the number of participants in the scheme, and of course we're continuing to make changes. But I make the point, it's fully funded. The funding is there to deliver the services that are required. We're focused on getting as many people into the scheme as possible and continuing to deliver the services. Can I make this point? Of those 250,000, 78,000 were not previously receiving support for their disability. That's 78,000 people who are now better equipped to fully participate in the life of our community, notwithstanding their disability. That's what the NDIS is all about.
On another issue this week, the Prime Minister has committed to preference Labor ahead of One Nation at the federal election. Would you encourage your National and LNP colleagues to do the same?
Well, the point I'd make is that the Liberal Party and the National Party are different parties.
In a coalition.
We are in a coalition. We work together very closely, but at the same time, we run candidates against each other from time to time, depending upon the state and the electorate, and so we do make some of our own decisions. The Prime Minister's been very clear about the position of the Liberal Party. I'm a Liberal MP. He has my full support in that decision he's taken.
He has your full support, but do you agree with where he's decided to place One Nation on the how to vote cards? Should he have placed One Nation last?
The decision he's made is that One Nation will always be preferenced behind Labor by the Liberal Party wherever we're running a candidate. I think that's a very good decision, which clearly reflects, amongst other things, as the Prime Minister has said, our very grave concern at what appear to be attempts to undermine our rigorous gun control laws in Australia, laws introduced by John Howard and Tim Fischer as Liberal and National Party leaders at the time, a profound benefit to the safety of Australians, and we are certainly opposed to attempts to that One Nation appears to have been involved in to wind those back.
Well, on that, are you concerned that you might suffer at the ballot box as a result of this? If you look at Mark Latham's tweet during the week, which I'm sure you're aware of, he said if One Nation mirrors the Morrison stance, we can bring this up on screen now, i.e. preferencing Labor ahead of the Liberal Nationals, how will the government fare in seats such as Banks, Gilmore, Hughes, Robertson, Riverina and Parkes? Is that of concern to you, those seats?
Look, what's of concern to me is that we demonstrate to the Australian people that we have the track record in government of keeping Australians safe, keeping Australians strong, returning to budget, managing our economy, generating jobs, doing all of the things across the full spectrum that people expect government to do. Now, single issue minor parties can't do that. Only the Liberal National Coalition can offer the Australian people a full suite of policies to keep Australians safe, keep Australians together, keep our country strong. And of course, we'll see at the budget this coming week, the first surplus budget delivered for many years, reflecting a lot of work over a number of years of our government to strengthen the budget, to strengthen the economy.
Just finally, your response to some comments made by Eddie Maguire at the AFL last night, some fairly controversial comments. Do you have a response to those?
Well, look, I understand Eddie apologised immediately. I think that was the appropriate thing to do. I'm sure there was no malice intended. But what it does remind us, all of us who don't suffer, who don't face the challenge of a disability every day, it does remind us that in this case Cynthia Banham, a double amputee, she faces very serious challenges every day, as do many of our fellow Australians. That is why, as a nation, we're spending $22 billion a year by 2020 on the National Disability Insurance Scheme so that Australians with disability can fully participate in the life of our community.
Is there a problem, though, when we have public figures like that, making comments like that and potentially stigmatising those with the disability? Does it not hinder the cause rather than further it?
Look, I'm absolutely confident there was no malice intended. I know that Eddie apologised immediately. Can I say I think all Australians admire Cynthia Banham, and can I also say if this incident reminds all of us of some of the challenges that Australians with disability face and increases awareness of those issues, I think that will be a good thing.
Paul Fletcher, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for coming in this morning.